hit that button so we're all set. Okay, so to start, I'd like to introduce each one of our professional panelists on our session today. We are going to start with Sue Bruning. She is the Vice President of Marketing and Communications and the Chair of the Sustainability Council at Cascade Environmental. She has worked in the environmental field since 1997 with an emphasis on sustainability, program management, and content marketing. Sue holds a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Health from BGSU and an MBA from California State University, Long Beach. Sue currently serves on the Board of Governors for AAF Toledo and chairs the Programs Committee. She resides in Perrysburg, Ohio with her husband and 3 sons who are helping her reach her goal of 50 by 50. Just 7 more states to visit before that milestone birthday. I love that fun fact, Sue. We'll have to hear about that in a minute because that's really cool. Our next panelist is Kate Fineske, who is currently the Senior Director of Institutional Advancement with the National Museum of the Great Lakes, where she oversees the museum's marketing, communication, development, and community partnerships. She has over 20 years of experience in communications, education, and nonprofit leadership. Kate has an undergraduate degree in graphic design, marketing and communications from University of Toledo, and a master's of business administration from Loras University. She began her career in advertising and over the past few decades has worked to bridge her communication work with nonprofit operations, having formerly served as Assistant Executive Director for a national nonprofit organization based in New York, and most recently as Vice President at United Way of Greater Toledo. On a personal note, she is active on many community boards, has 3 school-age children, and lives with her husband, Adam, and their 3 children in Sylvania, Ohio. Thank you, Kate, and we're happy to have you. Next up, and certainly last but not least, we have Carrie Schwabel, who is the Media Operations Specialist at the Cooper Smith Agency in Toledo, Ohio. Starting his professional career in 2015 as a digital media specialist, Carrie has more than 5 years of experience in the rapidly evolving digital world. Carrie joined AAF Toledo as a member in 2017 and was recently elected to the Board of Governors in June of 2020. He participates as co-chair in both the communication and programs committees. So thank you to Carrie for being here as well. We're really excited about all 3 of your backgrounds and the great perspective you're going to bring to our session today. So thanks again for your time. Before we begin, we'd like to share a few words from our gold event sponsors, Therma-Tru Doors and Mad Ad Collective, and our silver sponsor, the University of Toledo. So in 1 second, we're gonna play some video from each one of those event sponsors. If you could hold, here it is. Oh, it's not playing sound, Melanie. Sorry. I'm not sure why the sound isn't working. Can you guys hear it?
No.
Oh, no.
Sorry, I didn't realize I thought I could still be muted. You're going to hear the monitor too. I don't think I need to start it over, but we'll continue it.
family of agencies. Creatives get paid for their work and build a foundation for a successful career in Toledo. Mentors donate their time to develop the next generation of talent. And our nonprofit clients get agency-level marketing services that don't break the budget. Let's say you're someone like Anthony, smart, hardworking, up for a challenge. You check out big old anonymous state university, and you feel, well, like a number. Then you do a 180. You visit the tiny technical school in your neighborhood, but now you start thinking they may not have the majors, research, technology, and experiences that you're sort of expecting. And then you check out Toledo. You meet a professor, and she tells you about the clinical experience you'll get right here at the University of Toledo.
Let's say you're someone like Hannah, bright, resourceful, ready to go. You check out fill-in-the-blank state university. You feel, well, a little lost. Then you reverse course. You visit that small college your uncle went to, but now you're stuck in neutral, wondering if maybe they don't have the majors, internships, research, facilities, and activities that you're sort of expecting. And then you check out Toledo. You meet an advisor, and he tells you about the experience and mentorship you'll find right here at the University of Toledo.
Awesome. Thank you, Melanie. So for the students on the line, you will have the opportunity to sign up for interviews with both MADAV Collective and Thermatrue Doors, either on Saturday during day 3 of our session or on Monday or Tuesday of next week. So to do this, to sign up, please see your email pass for instructions. We will also be posting links to those invites in the chat box during this session. Lastly, we want to thank our silver sponsor, LaPlante Real Estate, and our bronze sponsor, Owens Community College. LaPlante Real Estate is a full-service real estate brokerage and property management company that provides a full spectrum of housing services to our clients, whether they are looking for residential brokerage services like buying or selling a home, investing in Northwest Ohio's rental properties, or seeking to rent a home in Toledo. Thank you to all of these organizations for your gracious support of our event. And now we'll begin with our guided discussion. I'd like to encourage any attendee, not the panelists themselves, but the attendees, to please mute your microphones to ensure that the panelists are able to be clearly heard by all attendants of the session. I'd also like to encourage you to please ask any questions you have for our panelists in the chat box during this Zoom. I'm going to make sure that we save the last 15 minutes or so of this session for these questions, so feel free to sprinkle them in throughout the content. And you can address them to all panelists, any panelist specifically, whatever you see fit, and whenever that question does come up in your head. Alrighty, so I'm gonna get started. I'm excited, especially because I now know all of these panelists and have an idea of their background. So let's get into that specifically. I'd love to start with your career paths. Could you tell everybody on the line what made you wanna work in the advertising and marketing industry today? And you can all take this one. I know you all have different reasons. So if anyone wants to jump first, and then we can jump off of that.
Well, I'll go first. I never anticipated a career in marketing. So it was really more of a natural transition for me. So as you heard in my bio, my undergrad is in environmental health. And so, I started out in the environmental industry, wanted that real field experience, and also wanted more of an academic experience. I did not want to work in an office. And so as I progressed and became responsible for program management, managing contracts, I understood the importance of having, just a basic business acumen, knowing how to make your projects profitable, and, securing resources for your clients as well. So I went back and got my MBA, and of all the things that you study in an MBA program, accounting, finance, HR, marketing. Like marketing just kind of lit a spark for me. And so I was fortunate to be able to start wrapping that into my environmental career, and just kind of followed the path along there. And when the opportunity came up for a full-time marketing position, I, was really excited to take that on. And that was about 6 years ago. And so it's been great.
Awesome. Thanks, Sue.
I can go next.
Yeah, great.
My name is Kate Fineske. I work for the National Museum of the Great Lakes, as was introduced. I am now more in nonprofit communications and marketing, but I did begin my role in advertising, working with Hart Associates was my first main job. When I went into my undergraduate degree at the University of Toledo, I was actually an art major. I loved all things creative. So I I loved to draw. I loved to write. I especially loved to write. I loved storytelling. And I was a musician. I just kind of was looking for something that I could do that would follow my passion in creativity, but also provide me with an income. And that was a tough one, right? Computers were just starting to kind of come out. Design through computers was just starting to come out. And I ended up going into graphic design as my major, and I loved it. I worked for multiple years as a graphic artist. I started expanding my skills when I started teaching at Owens Community College. I taught at Owens Community College as an adjunct for 18 years, which really allowed me to gain a lot of great skills in advocating and communicating. And what I realized is that I really liked the idea of bridging advertising and communications and nonprofit work. I did go back and get my MBA, and that has kind of led me right to the path where I am right now, which is overseeing advertising, communication, marketing in the nonprofit world.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. Carrie,
All right, I'm Carrie Schwabel.
Go ahead.
I'm Kerry Schwable. Much like Kate, I also went to the University of Toledo. And I studied communications, but I actually started my career in broadcast and transitioned into the digital media world. I was always fascinated with commercials and how they get people to, act upon commercials, whether it's call now or go here. I was always fascinated by that kind of transaction. So that transfer of information to the person was always something that, sparked my interest. But through my years at the University of Toledo, I studied communications and just sort of dipped my toes in all the different pools there are there with media and, journalism and all those different things. And I ended up in broadcasting. And then, one day I just met a guy at a football game that I was working at, and he ended up being the director of digital media at the Toledo Blade, and I ended up getting a job there. It was actually a cornfield in Bedford, because the football fields right next to a cornfield. So that's kind of how I first landed. My first job was in a cornfield, and then from there it's been nothing but history since. I spent 3 years at the Blade, and then moved over to Cooper Smith, where I am now. And I'm a digital specialist, so I handle the transfer of audio spots and video spots to different vendors. But in reality, my job is just the transfer of information from one place to another.
Sure.
So that transfer of information has been something that I've kind of, held on to throughout my growth.
I love that. And that brings me to another question, because Carrie kind of already started to paint the picture of what his normal duties are, what an average day might look like, which then leads me to the next follow-up to that, which is, and maybe you, Kate and Sue, can comment on this, what are you primarily responsible for at your respective companies, and what might an average day look like for you, on any given day or any given week?
Well, Go ahead, Sue.
For me, it's a lot of calls in the COVID world, but even before that, lots of calls and meetings. The way that our marketing team is structured, there's one person in Seattle, I'm here in Ohio, and our third team member is in the Boston area. So, you have to be cognizant of working with time zones. We do a lot of virtual interaction. In terms of my responsibility, it's more at the strategic level. So, understanding the competitive landscape. We have a fairly complex content marketing strategy. So we have to, number one, understand our audience and where they hang out, what kind of content they want to consume, what's going to be useful for them, and then how do we get that out and build this loyal fan base, if you will, right? So we're all about inbound marketing. We have to build this audience. We want subscribers so we can communicate with them in this world of crazy privacy laws and communication laws. So, how do we get creative, build this fan base of subscribers, and really help them through their careers so that we have this nice brand loyalty and this relationship with our clients.
Awesome. Thank you, Sue. Kate, you want to take it next?
A day in my life is very different. It always has been, but you could talk about two different times, pre-pandemic and pandemic,
Sure.
because it is very much different. I oversee development, fundraising, community partnerships, and marketing and advertising in my area. So I'm going to primarily focus on the marketing and advertising aspects of that. Pre-pandemic, it was a lot of, finding where our audience would most resonate and where to connect to. And I was new to the museum at that time, and there were a lot of things that I was planning on doing. I believe in authentic advertising is what I called it. I don't think that's a real name, but finding ways to interact with people authentically so they don't even know that you're really advertising to them, that you're just giving them an idea of what it is that might excite them to come and visit you. Post-pandemic, it was a lot less about, my budget was completely cut. I had no budget all of 2020, trying to find ways to market yourself when you're not even open. We were closed for 3 months, introducing virtual aspects that are both programmatic and also advertising for you, because people keep coming back to your website, seeing you online, seeing you on social media. Post-pandemic, a lot more of what I do has to do with dealing social media is a big one. Partnerships is a huge one. Networking and communicating. I work within a travel industry, so working really closely with Destination Toledo and some of the other things that help with the industries that help within the travel industry has been really, really important. I have an itty bitty budget now in 2021. I mean, I'm talking like not even worthwhile. And I spent the majority on that, hiring an individual who does our social media work for us, because I felt like that was where we really needed to focus a lot more of our efforts. So
awesome. I love that. That's great. So Kate, that was a perfect segue into my next question. Kind of you describing a day in your life kind of lends itself to this. What would you say are really important skills or essential skills for a career in advertising and marketing? What do you really think it takes, characteristic or skill set wise, to really thrive in this industry?
I think you need to, I'll real quickly say, I just think you need to be somebody who really enjoys learning and something new all the time. You have to be a continuous learner. You cannot stop with where you ended up in your undergraduate or in your postgraduate work. You have to be a lifetime learner, because that is what you are doing 24/7. Advertising strategies are developing and changing. The people in the industry are developing and changing. What you have to do to reach people is always changing. And the other thing, a skill that I really think is important to have, is to have good person-to-person communication skills as well. And now it's done a little bit more virtually. It used to be done a little bit more in person. Having that comfortability to be able to talk with somebody over the phone, virtually, or person to person is really, really important.
That's great. Sue or Carrie, anything to add to that?
I would agree, like communication is key, because if you're in a managerial role, right, you're working with a team of marketers. So you're all talking the same lingo, you're helping each other learn, but then you're also working, like in my case for content marketing, we have to have a rapport with our subject matter experts who are contributing on the technical end. So you're kind of explaining marketing to them and they're explaining technical things to you, and you have to find the median there of what's going to be right to deliver. And then there's conversations you have with management above you, with the executive team, to secure your budgets, hopefully, and to make the case for marketing. Why does marketing, or how does marketing help drive our business? Why are we important?
That's great. Carrie, you have anything to add?
Yeah, just to add to the communication piece, I mean, it's so important to, the human aspect of marketing and advertising is so important that you can't overlook the communication piece of it.
Absolutely, especially today, right? So I have another question, and I'm very interested to get all three of your perspectives on this one, because I think the answer could change or could be different. I just want to get your take on it, and there are no obviously wrong answers, but what do you think from your perspective is the true difference between advertising and marketing? Does it vary by company? Does it vary by agency? Like Carrie, I'd love for you to comment, especially on the agency side, and Sue and Kate on both sides. But really, I'm just looking for your take. What would you answer if somebody were to say, what's the difference between advertising and marketing today?
Well, I'll take a plug at it.
Go ahead.
Just to start.
Yeah.
In my mind, coming from somebody who is not in an agency experience anymore, right? So I would say that advertising is putting yourself, and this is in my mind, right, out there in a paid avenue, whether it be through paid advertising digitally, or in print, or over the radio, or over the television. Marketing to me is a little bit more both personable and research oriented, because it depends on which area that you're going towards it. Marketing and everything really these days requires a lot of data connected to it. So making sure that you understand what it is, who you're communicating to, the effectiveness of your strategy that you're communicating. And then also from a more authentic position, to me, marketing is more, being present and being able to passionately speak about what it is that you're putting out there. Again, I'm talking from being connected to, outside of an agency with an institution. So that would be probably what I see as a major difference. I'm curious to hear what the other two have to say.
Me too. I love this question, and great answer, Kate. That was awesome.
Well, for me, go ahead, Carrie.
Okay. Yeah, I would have to say kind of along those, and I'm sort of in I'm younger in my career than Kate and Sue. So
Sue, she's like, ouch.
Sorry.
He meant not a season. Yeah.
Not his experience.
Less experienced is a better, yes. So basically, the way I look at it is advertising is sort of like an older way, a less.
Now I got him flustered. Sorry,
No,
Carrie.
no, you can say old. It's okay.
Not offended.
They know they're not old. They're young.
So, I think I agree with what he's trying to say, though. I think I know what you're trying to say. So just
advertising,
put it out there.
Yeah, advertising is sort of an older type of, advertising per se, and marketing sort of the new age. And if you had to put it into a perspective of campaigns, marketing would be the branding campaign and advertising would be the direct response campaign.
Sure.
So those kind of different ways to look at it, sort of like the paid versus other way that Kate was saying, but that's sort of how I look at it, is advertising more of a direct response frame to it, or optic.
To me, marketing is more of a holistic approach, whereas advertising is more about just getting your message out there. Marketing is about understanding your target audience and the client profiling and building a relationship and working that inbound strategy, right? So you want to be a destination for your target audience as opposed to just talking at them.
Yep. Absolutely. That was well said, Sue.
That was. I love that word choice of destination. That's great. And that's definitely applicable today more than ever, for sure, to be that destination, be that place where people naturally might come or look to you for resources or information, or, you know, they're not turned off by what you're putting out there. They're intrigued and they're inspired, or whatever that, you know, that word or action phrase is. So that's great. Again, I love that question. And Carrie, I do understand what you were trying to say too, because if anyone has ever seen, for example, the show on Netflix, Mad Men, that to me is like the staple advertising in the 50s. Like they were known as the Mad Men, you know, and I immediately thought that when you were trying to explain what you were saying. I think that was the first impression, or at least that show tries to position it as the first take on advertising, when it became really relevant for, you know, for people or for companies to start thinking about how to present themselves out in the world, in billboards, in magazine ads, you know, things that are not so much the most common forms of advertising in every shape today. Obviously, they're still important, but they have become more diverse, you know, in the current world as we live in it. So awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to the next question. And I also like this one too, and it's kind of relative to the one I just asked, but it's more specific around careers in marketing and advertising. So there are a lot of paths that a career in these fields can take. And just as some examples to throw out there, it could be anywhere from brand and product management to market insights to marketing communications. What do you think from your perspectives is the most in demand right now? And do you think that'll change in 5 years, let's say? What do you think is really that hot ticket career or role based on the need as it is today?
I think marketing operations is a great direction to go. And that's like the technical end of marketing. So if you're using a marketing automation system like Marketo or HubSpot or Pardot, understanding all of the data that you can get out of that, being able to construct an email marketing campaign, understanding Google Analytics and how to tweak your budget or your efforts or, you know, your human resources around that data to optimize your efforts. So for me, I would say marketing operations.
Awesome. Love that. Anyone else have
I wonder if video is going to be, you know, even bigger and bigger and bigger. I would say, you know, short, concise, but creative videos. I really feel like a lot of people are going that direction. I also feel as though Sue was talking about data. I do believe that data and understanding data is really, really important. I used to say when I was in undergrad and I was more in the art side of things, saying, you know, people don't understand what goes into a fine arts degree or, you know, into graphic design degree, because it's almost like you're going to be, I mean, and this is not a great comparison, but, you know, a medical doctor who needs to know, a generalist who needs to know everything about everything, you know, and I still feel like undergraduate degrees, if you can learn to be creative and functional and still understand and not shy away from understanding data and continuous learning, that's going to make you successful. Because you know what? Every 10 years, it's a new thing in marketing, communications, and advertising. So we can talk about what's going to be happening in the next 5 years, but if that's all you want to do for the rest of your career, likely, I don't think that's going to happen.
Sure. That's great.
Yeah, I'd say continuing with the analytics piece of it, there's so much information out there. Being able to know what information you need, what information is important, and clearing that to paint a clear picture is huge. The other piece of it, I think, is social. Social is something that's just growing with the amount of information out there. And the relevancy of your branding and the kind of social messages that you're putting out there are huge, especially with the younger generation and who everyone's trying to target. So analytics and social, definitely.
Yeah. And social's changing all the time, right? We're getting new platforms. Other platforms are fading. They're always changing their algorithms. So when you think you've got it nailed, they change something and you have to figure out, how do I get top of mind again?
And they always change it just as you've finished adjusting everything so that you're all in line with how it used to be.
And you got to race to do the update or whatever it is. Yep,
it's like whack-a-mole.
It really is. It's a game. It's almost that, a gamified experience. No, I totally understand that. There's all kinds of changes every single day. And I completely agree. It takes being used to that. Like you said earlier, Kate, it takes, wanting a career that isn't the same every day or that is constantly changing, because it is so natural that this world is, or this industry specifically, is always going to be changing. You're always going to be wanting to learn something new, or learn something new just by attending a meeting or whatever it is that you're, put into in your daily role. So I think that's great. Okay. So I have an interesting question to follow up that one. And that is, marketing is often a catch-all position within some companies. I wouldn't say all, but I would say within some companies it could be considered as such. And along this line, it can also be one of the most vulnerable in terms of leadership changes or reorganizations or even layoffs. And this is really focused on students specifically, what should students do now as they're really getting started to prepare for a career in such a demanding field? What would be that advice you would give, just given that kind of perspective?
Don't be afraid to raise your hand and embrace every opportunity. I think each one of us kind of talked about how our career paths were unpredictable, if you will. And if you joined the silver medal panel discussion back in January, we had 3 very well-established award-winning professionals on there, and everyone told the same kind of story, right? We never anticipated how the path would wind up. So whatever you're anticipating now, whatever you envision your career to be, it's probably not going to happen the way you envision it today. So don't be afraid to jump in opportunities. Don't ever say that's not my job. Find it a way, find a way to make it part of your job and find a way to learn something new.
I love that.
If you make yourself relevant and needed, you're going to be relevant and needed. And so it's those people that say, but I'm the social media person and that's all I do. That was what I was hired to do. And that's what I like to do. And that's what I want to do. That's great, but that's not reality, right? Marketing is cover a wide plethora of different things, so making sure that you want to do a lot of different things. I mean, I think that's make yourself relevant, make yourself, and always put your best foot forward. I always try, you're going to make mistakes, learn from those mistakes. Don't make those mistakes again. Put your best foot forward. I learned that as a designer. That was one of the first things I learned, that if you put 3 logos out to a client, they were going to pick the one that you least liked. Every single time. I'm not kidding. It was just, that's what happened. And so what I learned was I wasn't going to present something unless I felt that I was comfortable with somebody selecting whatever it was that they selected. And that's how I have lived my entire life then. I'm not putting something out there that I'm not comfortable doing.
That's a good parenting rule, right? You never, ever offer your kids a choice that you're not willing to follow through with.
I love that.
They'll never pick the one you want them to.
That's so true. So very relevant to all fields. Absolutely. I love that. Carrie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, Sue and Kate just nail it every time. Everything that I, say, they just say. It's ask questions and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone and do something you're comfortable doing.
Even if that's volunteering with a professional association, right, Carrie?
Right.
There you go.
Right.
Perfect example.
Right.
That's great. So my next question, we kind of touched on in the beginning of this conversation, but to get really specific, obviously this past year has been unlike any other. We've been in unprecedented times, as every email that you receive from every brand you get email newsletters for. But I'm curious about your perspective on what's the biggest way that the marketing and advertising industry has changed or evolved in the past year? If you had to boil it down to one thing about this industry specifically, what would that biggest change be?
Meeting your audience where they are. So, you know, nearly everyone's work situation changed in the last year. So being a little bit more flexible, reaching out to accommodate, you know, for Cascade, most of our clients are environmental engineers and consultants who could no longer sit in an office with, you know, 500 people or 100 people. We do a lot of brown bag lunches, so we weren't allowed to go into those offices and present in person anymore. So being able to meet those and still reach out and maintain a relationship when you couldn't have in-person contact. And now battling Zoom fatigue.
Right?
For me, our audience tends to be, we're trying to bring it to a more youthful age group, but we do tend to veer at a older population of our target audience. And one of the things that the pandemic really changed for us is that age demographic became much more able to use electronic devices and to communicate online. That has been super beneficial to us, and it's sped up the way that we have been able to and will be able to do things in the future. You know, we do still have a print newsletter that goes out quarterly, and I do believe in diversifying how you're communicating. So that should be email, that should be print, that should be social media, that should be advertising, that should be public relations. All those things help to build a really good communication tools with everybody, but we are going to be able to make a lot of changes that are more digital a lot faster than I anticipated. For instance, you know, the mail has been taking forever. It's not a great way to do membership renewals, and we're a membership group. People are members of the National Museum of the Great Lakes, so that they can get in as much as they want to and participate in some of our bonus activities. But you know, we're going to start looking at doing membership renewal electronically. We're noticing a lot more donations that are coming in electronically. We are able to put on programming that our target, I couldn't believe it. We had a lecture that we have a spring and a fall lecture series. We are doing this first lecture series this spring, all virtual. And we had our second one of the spring, and we had over 400 people register and over 250 people live online during the lecture last night. That went from 7 until 8:30 at night. Then it's pre-recorded, and we have a ton more people that also looked at it. Whereas our lectures used to be free to our members, and then you paid what it cost to get into the museum before for people that were non-members. All of our virtual lectures are free, but we offer people to buy the book online and get it if it's an author that's selling the book, or they are able to make a donation. We brought in close to a couple $1,000s, and we used to maybe break even before. And these aren't big numbers in the grand scheme of things, but they all add up. So that idea of changing people's comfortability with electronic devices has been just wonderful for our organization.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
So
and for our agency, it's been connected TV. And I say that, you know, back 5 years ago, it was, oh, there's this new thing, it's OTT or connected TV. And every year, and kind of like, oh yeah, it's this new big thing. And then finally, follow the audience, obviously. So we're connecting people in the home and reaching them that way. So connected TV has been the biggest change for us.
That's great. Yeah, because everyone is watching TV these days, right? Since we're not going out as much anymore too. So makes sense for sure in terms of your world, Carrie. Awesome. So this question is definitely related to something we talked about previously about how, you know, this industry is always changing. You have to be willing to learn and willing to adapt. So this is very personal to you. What sites or content do you use yourself as a professional in this field to continue your education and stay up to date? What are those resources that you really turn to help you stay up to date on the latest and greatest in this industry today?
Other than AAF?
Other than AAF. Appreciate that though.
For me, so one of my favorites is Anne Hanley for anyone who has to write copy or works on content.
Love her.
Yes, especially if you're doing newsletters. Highly recommend following Ann Hanley. She's got a great book on writing. Tamsin Webster with the Red Thread is an excellent resource to hone your messaging skills and delivery skills. And then Marketing Profs is an organization, just kind of, I rely on them to learn about all things marketing. They've got a great member forum where you can ask questions and everyone's super willing to help you out. So those are my top 3.
Great. Love those. Thanks, Sue. Who wants to go next?
So I would say, you know, I thought about this when I saw this ahead of time, and I've been asked this before, and I am a reader. I read everything, reading the news, listening to the news podcasts, learning about what's going on in the world keeps you relevant. I really, those are the tools that I use the most. I love LinkedIn. I love conferences. I like meeting and connecting with people in person, which is a lot harder to do these days. But I find that I learn the most from other people or from watching it be done. So when I read something in the news or in a magazine, I like, oh my God, I love how they phrase that. I may learn from that and take that into my experiences. And when I'm talking with somebody who has experience doing something or shares a really good idea about how they've organized their content in different ways, I learn really well from that. So it's hard for me to pinpoint one source, but LinkedIn and conferences are really my 2 primary sources, because I feel it's a little bit more authentic connecting being done.
Totally agree. Those are great. And you like to be absorbed in it too, which I can definitely relate to. It's all about absorbing yourself in other people's perspectives or just in the content that you can surround yourself with. So definitely think that's important. Carrie, anything to add for your resources personally?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm in the world of Google, so
sure.
my resources are limited to what Google offers, which is by the week. So, but one app I do use, which has a lot of marketing and advertising articles within it, is Flipboard, and you can kind of pick your different interests, and you'll kind of get relevant content specific to those. But you know, also like Kate said, LinkedIn is another great resource.
Great. Love all those. I'm a big fan. Sue mentioned newsletters, and I'm a very big fan. When I was first starting out, I subscribed to just about any newsletter I could find in marketing and social media, just because they usually are good at, you know, putting it right in your inbox and saying like, you need to know about this update or this different platform change. So I feel like they're intended for that kind of update purpose. And so that's why that would be something I personally recommend, is kind of immersing yourself in those publications that might send out newsletters on some kind of cadence, and subscribing, because it can't hurt just to see what you like, what you don't like. You can always unsubscribe if they don't end up giving you the content that you're looking for. So just for what it's worth, another nugget there. So this next question is actually a really fun one, and this is really catered towards the students on the line, because obviously they're just starting out. Maybe they've had a couple different jobs before that aren't related to the industry, and I'm sure that you guys probably did too before you broke into it. So this hopefully we can have some fun with. What was your worst part-time job, and what is one skill that you gained from that job that you still use in your career today? So it's stuck with you for this long that it's something you still apply in the professional worlds that you live and breathe in your current roles. Anyone want to take that? I know it's kind of a fun one.
I'll go for it.
So go ahead.
Okay.
I had to stain decks for a summer when I was in college, and being in the hot with a paintbrush is not very fun. It was a single guy operation. He had a paint spray or a stain sprayer, and I had a paintbrush at the small areas. But I think the biggest takeaway from that was make sure the client's happy.
I love it.
If I didn't get anything and somebody complained, we had to go back. So.
Totally applicable to today. I love it. Very, very real world example, Carrie. Make sure the client's happy. Kate,
I've always been super fortunate, I think, I don't know, I guess it shows because I went in as an art and music major, right? When I first went into college, like I have always just kind of veered myself towards things that I'd like to do.
Sure.
Even my part-time jobs, I was a lifeguard that was my first job. And I got to be I was actually at a lake. And so, I will tell you that the job that I least liked, it probably shouldn't have been part-time, and it really wasn't part-time. But it was actually after I had my daughter and I started doing freelance work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's a relevant experience to share.
Sure.
Because I missed being surrounded by other creative professionals.
Mm.
It was a lonely job and something that you don't realize when you're doing your own thing. You're not just doing the things that you love to do, like designing or being creative or, talking to the individuals that you want to help, but you're also having to do the business side of it. You're having to do the finance side of it. You're having to do the, finding new business side of it. And although you may like doing each one of those things, when you're doing them all together, it takes a certain special type of person to be able to love that. And I just found that I was not drawn to that. I thought I'd like it because I thought it would be something that I could do that would be independent and I could work my schedule around it and, have my family and still have my cake and eat it too type thing. And I love being surrounded by other individuals. They drive me to be more creative. They introduce me to new ideas. So I would say that, it probably was supposed to be more full-time. I ended up supplementing it again by continuing to work at Owens Community College, finding other things, volunteering other places. I just didn't love that job, but I learned a lot about myself from it. So when you talk about what you learned, I learned that I just like to be surrounded by other people.
That's wonderful.
I was thinking about this, and I didn't have a whole lot of part-time jobs. I had one part-time job for a really long time, and I met my husband there, and we're still married, and we have lifelong friends that we hang out with. So I had to cross that one off the list. But my very first job, I wanted to work at the local grocery store. That's where all the cool girls worked. They were at the checkout register. So I applied, and they didn't have any openings except for the produce department. So I'm like, oh, okay. And it was awful. You had to be there at 6 a.m. and you're icing down the shelves where the produce sits and you're pulling the moldy leaves off the lettuce. And so I would get really dirty. And I was scheduled to work just a couple times a week. So I go into work and they said they didn't need me. So I went home and I came back 2 days later and I had the same shirt because my wardrobe was limited because all my clothes were getting trashed. And one of the checkout girls is like, you wore that shirt on Monday. I can't believe you wear the same shirt. So the lesson there is never wear the same shirt twice to work.
People will notice.
Yeah. And also, if you're not in it, if you don't really love what you're doing, don't be afraid to leave. If it's not for you, it's not for you. So I didn't last very long in that job because I didn't like it.
That's great. Both of you have similar stories. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So did you have something else to add? I didn't.
Well, I was going to say, so I left and then I found this job where I met my husband and the rest is history.
Jinx. I love it. That's great. I think that's really important, especially for the sake of the students on the call today, because just because you get a first job or you think it's what you want to do doesn't mean you can't pivot, or doesn't mean that experience isn't going to shape your next experience or your experience after that. So I think that's a really good reminder for everybody on the call to, keep that in mind. You're not trapped into one role just because you think you have to be. You always have options. There's always new opportunities and experiences out there. And at the least, you're getting that experience to add to the next thing. So I love that perspective. And I think that was a very personal example from both of you. So thank you. And thank you, Carrie, because I think it's great and important to remember the client's perspective as well. Always important, especially in this field. So we actually have a question from the audience, and this one is really specific to internships or even, potential hires in general. But, since we're talking to students, we have a couple of them on the call today. I want to ask you, what type of materials do you look for in a potential intern's portfolio or a resume? What are some things that might stand out to you in a resume if someone was either applying to work for you or, thinking about actually interning at your company? What stands out?
Well, I will say just the visual appearance of the resume. So I was hiring for a full-time marketing position, and I couldn't believe the bland 3-page resumes that were coming in. I'm like, come on, people, like this is your profession. Like you should make these stand out. So the handful of people that had some visual elements, that didn't have a cluttered resume, that kept it to a page or a page and a half, those were the ones that grabbed my attention that I felt were worthy of a conversation.
That's great.
100% agree. Keep it to one page, but keep it organized, keep it clear. That doesn't even mean that it has to be graphically, like have a bunch of graphics on it, but there are ways to make something stand out and look good and readable. That's first and foremost what advertising all is about. You want people's eyes to go here, here, here. There's a primary, secondary, tertiary focal point, right? You know, so we want to make sure that when you want to make sure that people are looking at your resume and they really want to read it. The other thing that I look for though, I particularly believe that marketing, advertising, communications, you need to be a good writer. Cover letters are really, really important whenever I'm hiring anybody, and that includes even an intern. I would recommend to everybody, unless it specifically says no cover letter, please. Even if it doesn't say include a cover letter, include a cover letter, and make sure that that cover letter is targeted to that individual job and not just a blanket cover letter, that you are really expressing why you think you would be a good fit for that particular internship.
Yeah, and show a little personality in it, right?
I love that. Make it personal. Carrie, anything to add?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
But maybe you could comment.
Piece of it.
Well, maybe you could, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I would just always say, make sure you follow up, because you don't know how far that could go. There could be another job that you apply for 6 months that, oh, we already filled the position that they applied for before, but they did follow up with us, and it's just a nice gesture, and you know, it goes a long way.
Let me say one more thing too. I do want to say that just because you weren't hired for an internship or a particular role, don't let that discredit you to applying for other jobs elsewhere or even at that same organization. And I will go back to a personal experience I have. So not only have I hired people that I turned down for jobs previously just because it wasn't the right fit for them, I myself, when I first started out at Hart Associates, I applied for one role. I was not experienced enough for it. They called me back 3 months later and I got a job there. So I do believe that you put a good resume in. Don't get down on yourself because you weren't hired. It just might not have been the right role for you.
I love that.
The worst experience I had when making calls to people who had applied for the position, a particular candidate answered the phone and she's like, I've applied for so many positions. Can you tell me what this is about? I really don't remember.
Oh no.
And I'm like, just thank you for your time. And that was the end of it.
Do your research.
And apply and apply and apply
and apply. I love it.
And apply and apply. Because especially now, you guys, I mean, the industry is, I don't want to say it's flooded, but there's a lot of people that did lose their jobs, which means that there's a lot of people that are also looking that might just have specific targeted, like, oh my gosh, you just have a bigger pool. I just hired somebody new at the museum and I was overwhelmed by the amount of applications I got, and not just by the amount of applications I got, but by the amount of applications I got that were so focused and relevant with a passion and understanding of the Great Lakes, with a background in maybe history, but also with a ton of experience that was really relevant. Like, it was an entry-level position. I mean, so just keep trying, you know, there are roles out there for people. It's a hard time though.
That's great. Yeah, bring some realism to it, but also you're right. I mean, don't give up, don't get discouraged.
Right.
Something more fundamentally I want to ask all of you, because I think this is a good question, and you already kind of mentioned, like, Carrie, I know you deal a lot with Google, and Sue, I know you mentioned HubSpot. How important are certifications for potential interns, potential new hires? Is that something you really look for when you're assessing resumes? Is that something you'd really recommend to a student that might be trying to break in to go out and seek any certification that they might be able to get, you know, starting out? Or do you kind of expect that to come with the role and maybe that's part of their training or something that's further down the line? What do you expect, I guess, is my real question.
Yeah, well, if we're talking about, interns or entry-level positions, definitely not required.
Sure.
But that's a question I would ask during the interview process is, what are your intentions for continuing education, or are there certain things that you want to pursue? And then it's actually a requirement for my marketing team that they take on some kind of continuing education every year. So that could be something simple like attending a conference and going to the sessions, or working through Salesforce and their courses and getting badges that way.
Great. That's helpful.
Yeah, I would just
Go ahead.
I would just add always learning.
Yeah.
Always continuing education. It changes so much. You always got to learn.
I would say it never hurts to have additional credentials on things. So it's if you are having trouble finding a job and you want to continually learn, like Carrie said, having those credentials, they never, ever, ever hurts. Is it a requirement? Is it something that I'm looking for? If somebody had 10 different credentials, another person had 0, would that be the reason that I'd give them the job over somebody else? Absolutely not. To me, it's more about what their resume looks like, how it reads, what their cover letter is about.
Sure.
And then honestly, it's all about getting to that first spot. And that first spot is having either a face-to-face or a phone or a personal conversation with somebody that really, to me, makes a difference.
Great. Awesome. Thank you all so much. We're about wrapped up here, but before we actually end the session, we have one more question that just came in, so I'll ask it and then we can end the session. So this question is, would you hire someone who had no education experience but is self-taught? This could apply to internships or an actual career entry level. Would you consider that self-taught perspective, or in your opinion, do they need to have that degree or that education?
I would definitely consider it, but like Kate was saying, it really depends on work experience. It depends on that personal interaction as you have conversations and go through the screening and interview process. It's crazy. I interviewed someone who was perfect on paper and it felt like this interview was just going to be a formality, and she ended up being the worst candidate out of 3. So you just never know till you meet.
Very true. Yep. Definitely important.
And I see kind of the follow-up question. She said she asked because she see that education is not needed in all fields. I don't think that you need to have that education background. However, I think sometimes you need to work a lot harder when you don't have that.
Sure.
And that means through networking and having real conversations with people, pulling together a portfolio or whatever it is that you might need to share to express your work. You might get a job in a different way than somebody with an education would have. But no, I mean, you don't need it. No.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. We're wrapped for time here, but again, I really appreciate all of your perspectives. We touched on every single aspect of advertising and marketing, as well as gave some great advice to our students. So thank you to our 3 panelists so much for your time and your perspectives today. Thanks for all the students on the line, and thank you again to our sponsors. We really appreciate it, and we hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thank you all.
Thanks for the invite, Sally. It was a pleasure.
Bye. Thank you.